I kept telling myself she didn't mean it the way it sounded. That she wasn't trying to be cruel or evasive when she said things like maybe another night or I'm tired, or the one she used most often. The one that rolled off her tongue with that soft apologetic shrug she did with her right shoulder. I just don't think it's a good idea right now. She always said it like she was holding the words back and letting them slip through a narrow crack she couldn't quite close. I'd stand there in her doorway pretending I didn't already know the answer, pretending I was surprised each time. She'd give me that small tired smile like she was comforting a child who'd asked for something unreasonable, and then she'd gently nudge the conversation away from where I was steering it. I didn't push, not in any way that counted. I'd just linger a second longer than I should, watching the way she wrapped her arms around herself, half covering the loose t-shirt she wore as if the fabric meant something, as if it was armor. I'd tell her good night, she'd murmur it back, and I'd walk down the stairs slowly so she'd have time to close the door before I reached the bottom. She always waited until I hit the second to last step before shutting it. Every time. And that small detail, that little habit, stuck to me more than any of her explanations. She once told me her ex needed her more than I did, that she wasn't in the right place emotionally, that she didn't want to complicate things, that she valued our connection too much to risk changing it. I pretended I understood even though none of it made sense. It wasn't that she didn't want connection. She just didn't want it with me. She didn't say it, but I could hear that truth echoing behind every soft refusal. I didn't resent her. Not then. The resentment was quieter, buried under something else, curiosity, maybe, or fascination, the kind that feels like a hand reaching out in the dark. I kept trying anyway, each attempt a little subtler than the one before. I'd offer to take her out for coffee. She'd smile and say she wasn't up for going out. I'd suggest we watch something together. She'd say she had work to catch up on. I'd compliment her hair, her shirt, the way she decorated her apartment. She'd thank me but step back just slightly, movement so small it was almost imperceptible, except to me. I noticed everything. I always did. The irony was that she talked to me more than anyone else. Sometimes she'd call late at night, her voice quiet, like she didn't want the walls to hear her, and she'd tell me about her day, her worries, the things her ex had said or done. I listened. I always listened. I didn't judge her or interrupt her or try to fix anything. I just stayed on the line until she got tired enough to fall asleep mid-sentence. Then I'd whisper goodnight even though she couldn't hear me. I think she knew I'd stay no matter how little she gave. That knowledge settled into her posture, into the lazy way she interacted with me, like I was furniture she didn't have to think about. I should have minded, but I didn't, not at first. I kept going over to her place in the evenings. She'd let me in distracted, always in those soft clothes that looked like they'd been washed too many times, always barefoot. Always moving just a little too fast like she was trying to outwalk her own thoughts. Her apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something sweeter. Vanilla or a candle she never actually lit. I'd sit on her couch while she moved around the room picking things up and setting them down, never finishing whatever she started. Sometimes she'd forget I was even there, and I'd watch the way she shook her hair back from her face, or the way she rubbed her thumb along the edge of her phone when she was anxious. I'd memorize these small motions without meaning to. They just sank into me. Every night I tried to ask her out felt like copying the same sentence in a notebook until the letters blurred. I'd start casually, something like we could go somewhere this weekend if you want, and she'd pause just long enough for me to hope. Then say, I don't think it's a good idea. The tone never changed. It wasn't firm, not harsh. It was more like she was asking me to understand something she didn't know how to explain. Eventually she added the line about her ex needing her. She didn't say it dramatically. She just dropped it into the conversation one night while tearing apart the cardboard from a delivery box. She said it like it was simple truth, like it closed the topic. I nodded. I always nodded. But after she said it, something shifted in me, like a weight sliding to a new position. I didn't doubt the sincerity of her feelings. That wasn't the issue. What bothered me was how she phrased it, needs me more. Not I still love him, not I'm not over him, just need. As if she was some resource to be allocated, and he'd claim the larger share. I walked home that night slower than usual. I kept thinking about the way she didn't look at me when she said it, how she kept her eyes on the torn cardboard pieces instead, her hands moving a little too fast. It was the first time I wondered if maybe she wasn't confused after all. Maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. Not maliciously, just instinctively. She knew I'd stay. She knew I wouldn't argue. She knew she could keep me suspended in that place between yes and no, close enough to feel her warmth but too far to touch it. And I let her. I didn't know why. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to admit it. There was a night, late, colder than the others, when she apologized for not being able to give me what I wanted. She said it while standing in the doorway again, arms wrapped around herself, hair tied up messily like she'd given up trying to fix it hours earlier. She looked sincere, almost fragile. She told me she didn't want to hurt me. I told her she wasn't. She looked at me for a long moment, that searching kind of look she used when she thought I was hiding something. I kept my face calm, steady, unbothered. She nodded once, satisfied or at least willing to pretend to be, and told me good night. I walked away again, the same slow steps, the same careful descent. I didn't feel angry, just aware. Aware of the gap between what she said and how she acted. Aware of how she let me orbit her life without ever letting me land. Aware of the quiet pull she exerted without acknowledging it. These realizations didn't make me want her less. If anything, they sharpened something in me, made me pay more attention to the details I'd previously overlooked. The way her voice softened when she asked me for favors. The way she'd touch my arm lightly when she needed reassurance. The way she'd lean just a fraction closer when she wanted comfort but step back instantly if I tried to move toward her. I started noticing the timing of her messages too. She always replied fastest when she was lonely or anxious, slowest when she was with someone else. She didn't hide it well, but I didn't ask questions. Questions imply expectation, and I didn't want her to think I expected anything. I wanted her to keep letting me in, even if it was only on her terms. The thing that sticks with me most from those nights wasn't the rejections themselves. It was how calm I felt walking away each time. Not numb, not defeated, just calm, like I was cataloging the information she was giving me, piece by piece. I wasn't keeping score. I was studying a pattern, and once you see a pattern clearly, it stops surprising you. That's what changed. The surprise faded. The hope didn't. People assume hope disappears when you're rejected enough times, but that's not true. Hope doesn't vanish. It mutates. It turns into something quieter, something that hides under the surface and waits. I didn't think about the future. I didn't imagine scenarios or plan anything. I just kept observing her, kept fitting the details together, kept noticing things she didn't realize she was showing me. And each night, when she told me no, when she asked me to understand, when she said she wasn't ready or that her ex needed her, I felt the same stillness settle in my chest. Not disappointment, not heartbreak, just stillness, like the quiet pause before a page turns. I don't think she ever saw that part of me. She only saw the deferential version, the patient one, the one who nodded and left without argument. She didn't see the man walking down the stairs afterward, hands in his pockets, mind tracing the shape of her refusals and finding something steady inside them. Something almost comforting. I didn't blame her for any of it. I didn't blame myself either. Some things just unfold the way they're meant to. And every night I slipped the car key I had into the ignition and drove away. I felt that strange combination of frustration and fascination tightening inside me, drawing me closer instead of pushing me away. That was how it started. Not with some dramatic moment or revelation, just with a slow accumulation of small details, small refusals, small observations that turned into something I didn't have a name for yet. But I would, eventually. I didn't decide to start noticing her routines. They just surfaced on their own, the way faint shapes emerge when your eyes adjust to the dark. It happened quietly, over weeks, maybe months, I'm not sure. Time during that stretch blurred into a long and broken evening. I wasn't trying to learn anything about her, not intentionally. I just couldn't unsee the things she repeated. She woke around 7:20 most mornings. Not 7:30 to 7:20. I know because sometimes she'd message me before getting out of bed, asking some small question or sending a half-formed thought. She always typed slowly at that hour, the words uneven, like she hadn't fully returned to herself yet. On days she didn't text, I still sensed the shift around that time, the subtle change in her online status, the rhythm of her responses when I wrote first. At 7:20 she was vulnerable in a way she never let herself be while awake and guarded. That detail rested in my mind like a pin on a map. She moved through her apartment with the same patterns, too. Mornings were quiet, almost ritualistic. She'd open the blinds halfway, never fully, because she didn't like the direct light on her face. She'd boil water but rarely finish her tea. She had a habit of touching things she passed: light switches, the corner of the table, the back of the couch, as if confirming that these objects still existed. She'd leave her bedroom door slightly ajar, never wide open, never fully closed. And in the evenings, she always circled the living room twice. I didn't know why. I still don't. It wasn't nervousness. More like she was resetting something inside herself. I noticed these things without meaning to, the same way a person might notice the flicker of a street lamp or the pattern of their own breathing. A quiet accumulation of knowledge. I didn't think it was wrong to know these things. They were just there, and my mind recorded them. She left small reflections of herself everywhere: half-read books, receipts, mismatched socks on the floor. Her life was scattered, but in a way that made sense if you viewed it from the right angle. I wasn't interpreting it. I wasn't judging her. I was just aware. And the more aware I became, the easier it was to anticipate her moods. When she was going to retreat. When she was going to reach out. When she was going to apologize for something she didn't need to apologize for. She apologized often. For answering late. For forgetting to call. For being distracted. For needing space. She'd say something like, "Sorry, today's been weird," and I'd tell her it was fine. And it was. Not because I didn't care, but because I felt something settle each time she revealed the smallest crack in her composure. I wasn't celebrating it. It wasn't triumph. It was more like a confirmation that the image she presented wasn't as seamless as she wanted people to think. I understood that. I respected it, even. She didn't know I noticed when she started speaking faster on nights she was anxious, or how her breathing slowed when she was telling me something she didn't want to admit. She didn't know I could tell when she was lying. Not about big things but the small ones. "I've been busy. I didn't see your message. I'm fine." She lied gently, without intent to deceive, more like she was trying to smooth over something wrong herself. I didn't call her out. I let the lies sit between us like soft cushioning. I think she needed them more than the truth. As time passed, my visits became less about trying to ask her out and more about watching the small shifts in her energy. She'd talk to me with her hands, her gestures sharp when she was irritated and loose when she was tired. She'd start sentences she never finished. She'd stand near me but never too near. That boundary was always there, thin but firm, and I never touched it. I think she assumed that meant I wasn't thinking about it. But boundaries only matter if you're planning to cross them. I wasn't. I didn't need to. I just watched them. The tension between us changed too. It wasn't the same as before. Her refusals didn't sting anymore, because they weren't surprises. They were consistent, reliable, almost comforting. I found myself predicting them with eerie accuracy: when she'd say no, when she'd shift the conversation, when her voice would soften at the edges just enough to make it seem like she wished she could say yes. She was predictable in ways she didn't realize. Humans always are. She had patterns in her frustration, too. When she was overwhelmed, she'd clean compulsively, moving objects from one end of the room to the other in loops that didn't achieve anything. When she was lonely, she'd send long rambling messages late at night, each line typed in a separate burst. When she was remembering her ex, she grew quiet, like she was looking inward at something only she could see. She didn't hide these things. She just didn't think anyone noticed. But I did. I noticed everything. It wasn't obsession, not in the way people describe it. I wasn't fantasizing about her or imagining futures. I wasn't plotting anything. There was just a steady attention, a calm receptiveness to the details she leaked without meaning to. The small slights accumulated too. Not the dramatic ones. She never humiliated me or insulted me. It was the understated things. The way she'd vent to me for an hour and then suddenly go offline without warning. The way she'd ask for my advice and then ignore it. The way she'd lean into me emotionally and then back away physically without acknowledging the disparity. Each moment was tiny, Forgettable on its own, but stacked together they formed a shape. A quiet imbalance. I didn't resent her for it. I just cataloged it. Routines are stabilizers. People cling to them because they make the world manageable. I learned hers naturally, the way someone learns their own breathing pattern when everything else goes silent. I could tell when she would check her phone next. I could predict when she'd look toward the window. I could sense when she was about to change the subject in conversation. It wasn't guessing. It was recognition, familiarity. After a while, I didn't need to see her to know what she was doing. I could picture her evenings with eerie accuracy, the slow pacing. The way she'd wrap a blanket around her shoulders even when it wasn't cold. The way she'd sit cross-legged on the couch and then shift to the floor when her thoughts got too restless. Sometimes I'd be driving home after seeing her and I'd imagine her moving through her apartment, piece by piece, each action following the one before it in steady sequence. I wasn't imagining her. I was remembering her. Memory is just stored observation. I didn't write anything down. I didn't need to. The details clicked into place on their own. Once a pattern locks into your mind, it holds fast. There was a moment, maybe the first time I realized how deep the noticing had gone. When she mentioned something trivial, how she always misplaced her keys in the evenings because she came home scatterbrained from work. She laughed when she said it, brushing it off like a joke. But the thing was, she didn't misplace them. Not really. She kept them in 3 specific spots, rotating without thinking: the small dish by the sink, the left pocket of her tote bag, the hook near the door she almost never remembered to use. When she said she misplaced them everywhere, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not annoyance. Not superiority. Something colder, more analytical. Because she believed she was unpredictable in that habit, but she wasn't. She had a system she wasn't conscious of, and I knew it better than she did. I didn't correct her. The knowledge wasn't meant to be shared. It was meant to be held quietly, like a glass bead in the palm of my hand. The more her patterns clarified, the more I felt something steady building inside me. Not affection, not love, just a kind of stillness. Like the calm you feel when you finish assembling a puzzle and suddenly the picture makes sense. She never noticed how silent I became around her during that period. I wasn't withdrawing. I was thinking, observing, matching her present behavior to her past patterns and adjusting my expectations accordingly. She sometimes asked if I was okay, if I was tired or bored or annoyed. I always told her I was fine, and that wasn't a lie. I was fine. I felt clearer than ever. She didn't know the difference between my warmth and my neutrality. She responded to both the same way, with small half-smiles, distracted nods, those soft apologetic gestures that always came when she wanted something from me without naming it. I didn't mind. I didn't need her to understand me. Understanding wasn't the point. The point was the clarity settling in layer by layer, making her more transparent to me than she probably was to herself. She thought she was hard to read. She wasn't. She thought she was unpredictable. She wasn't. She thought she was protecting me by keeping distance. She wasn't. She was revealing herself in every gesture, every hesitation, every routine repeated without thought. And I watched, and listened, and learned, quietly, patiently, and troubled. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't anticipating some turning point. The fixation wasn't a choice. It was an outcome. A slow, silent crystallization of attention. If she had looked closely at me during those weeks, really looked, she might have noticed the difference in my eyes, the steadiness there, the way I no longer asked questions or sought explanations. But she didn't look closely at anything unless it was already falling apart. And this wasn't falling apart. This was settling. This was becoming still. She woke later than usual that morning. I could tell before I even checked anything. Some shifts aren't about data or timing. They're about a subtle absence, like the space where a sound should have been but wasn't. It was past 9 by the time her presence flickered online, a small indicator that she was moving through her apartment again. I pictured her blinking against the light seeping in through the blinds she always left half open, her hair flattened on one side, the imprint of her pillow still fading from her cheek. She moved slower than normal. There was hesitation in the way her notifications appeared: one message to a coworker, another quickly deleted, then minutes of nothing. I imagined her pausing in the doorway between her bedroom and the living room, sensing something off without knowing what it was. People always feel the disturbance before they can name it. That's human intuition, the old animal instinct that notices the smallest change in the air. She walked differently. I knew she did without seeing it. When a person feels watched, actually watched, or imagine, they hold their breath in short bursts. They shift their weight too carefully. They listen to their own footsteps like they're someone else's. She didn't know why she felt that way. She just felt it. And I was nowhere near her. Not close enough to be seen. Not close enough to be heard. Just enough to observe. She walked around her apartment twice, her usual circuit, but this time she completed it slower, her hand trailing against the back of the couch like she needed grounding. I imagined her picking up her phone and putting it down again, checking the door lock even though she always locked it before bed, touching the window latch just to be sure it hadn't moved. Small gestures of uncertainty. Not fear, not yet. Just a quiet discomfort, the sense that the atmosphere had thinned, that something she relied on without realizing was missing. People don't know how much they depend on routine until the routine is disturbed. Her ex hadn't messaged her. She lingered on that fact longer than she meant to. I could almost picture the way she'd stare at her screen, thumb hovering above a blank conversation, waiting for something she wouldn't receive. Her silence stretched. Mine did too. There was no anger in it anymore. No longing. Just a steady coldness, like a lake in winter. She moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets in a half-distracted rhythm. She'd forgotten where she left her mug the night before. She always placed it in one of two spots, but this morning neither spot held it. She frowned at the counter. She checked the sink twice. She whispered something under her breath, something irritated, something small, and I felt a faint shift in myself. Not pleasure, not triumph, just acknowledgement. The world tilts differently when a pattern breaks. She'd find the mug eventually. Everything out of place eventually returns to its place. But the dissonance would linger in her. That faint question. Did I misremember? Was I tired? Am I losing track of things? People never jump to the dramatic conclusions they think they would. They just doubt themselves first. She made tea she wouldn't finish. I knew she'd forget about it as soon as it cooled enough to drink. She wandered again, a slow-pacing loop, moving around the living room and stopping near the window. Staring out with that squint she used when she tried to make sense of something she couldn't articulate. I watched from far enough that she couldn't possibly see me, but she looked in my direction anyway, not at me, just toward the wrongness she sensed. Her shoulders tensed. She stepped back from the glass. Her breathing shifted, shallow at first, then deeper, like she was forcing herself to calm down. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaled, shook her head, told herself she was imagining it. She always tried to rationalize her intuition. She never trusted it. That was one of the first things I ever learned about her. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't let a single thought disturb the surface of my mind. There's power in stillness. Not dominance, not control, just presence so quiet it becomes invisible. She closed the blinds fully for the first time in months. I could almost hear the soft rattle of the plastic slats as they fell into place. She locked her door again even though it was already locked. She checked her phone again. She typed something and deleted it. Then typed again. Then stopped. She didn't reach out to me. That part didn't surprise me. Reaching out requires clarity, and she didn't have any. She was drifting through that small internal fog people fall into when they sense a shift in their environment but can't locate the source. I wondered if she thought of me. Not because I needed her to, but because people default to the familiar when they feel lost. I wondered if she asked herself whether she'd said something wrong, whether she'd pushed too far, whether she'd crossed some line she didn't know existed. She didn't know what changed, but she knew something had. That's what mattered. She walked into her bedroom again, but only halfway, stopping at the threshold like she suddenly wasn't sure what she'd gone in there for. Her routines were unraveling, thread by thread, not dramatically, just softly, almost gently. She sat on the edge of the bed and stayed there for several minutes, elbows on her knees, hands dangling loosely. I imagined her looking at the floor, not focused on anything, just staring through the fibers of the carpet, trying to locate a thought that wasn't forming. She rubbed her palms together. She let out a small, uncertain sound as I cut short. Her patterns were failing her, and that quiet collapse settled into her posture. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something steadier, Something calm. A completion, maybe. A closing of the loop. Not because she hurt me. She didn't. Not because I wanted something from her. I didn't. Not anymore. It was just the point where everything aligned. She stood up eventually, restless again. She walked through the apartment with that uneven rhythm, each step slightly hesitant, as if the floor plan had changed overnight. She looked at the door a second time, then a third. She touched her throat, a habitual gesture when she was unsettled. She didn't speak. The silence in her apartment thickened, a kind of pressure that wasn't sound but sensation. I watched her without expectation, without emotion. She existed inside that small quiet cage of uncertainty, and I watched from outside it, steady and untroubled. She would go through her day differently after this. She'd notice the lazy weight of her own silence. She'd notice the way her hands shook slightly when she reached for her keys. She'd wonder if someone had been near the window, or if the shadows outside had shifted strangely, or if she had simply woken with her nerves too close to the surface. She'd try to explain it to herself. She wouldn't succeed. People need explanations, even false ones, to smooth out the wrinkles in their perception. She wouldn't find one. That was the silence she'd carry. And I would remain where I was, watching her from a distance she couldn't measure, not wanting anything from her, not driven by resentment or longing or heartbreak, just observing the final shape of things. The stillness felt complete. She stood at the window again, fingertips brushing the blinds, listening for something she couldn't name. I didn't move. I didn't need to. She looked out toward the world beyond the glass, her expression tight, confused, and settled, searching. She didn't see me. She never would. But she felt the shift. And that was enough. I let the quiet settle deeper, a final layer of calm spreading through me like a slow exhale. No triumph. No vindication. Just silence, the kind that fills a space once the last word has been spoken, even if no one realizes it was a final word. She was alone in her apartment, and comfortable without understanding why. And I watched from the steady distance I had chosen for myself, the one where everything was clear. The story didn't end with confrontation or revelation. It ended with her standing there in that dim morning light, sensing the change but unable to name it, and me watching, patient and cold and certain. The final silence wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. It was simply the space between us settling into its permanent shape. And in that shape, everything felt exactly as it should.